The sound of sirens clawed its way through the manicured hedges of our suburban street, getting louder, closer, an insistent scream that promised an ending. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of my mother's panic sweat and my father's expensive dying cigar. My brother Leo, the golden sun around which our family orbited, was a mess. His face was chalky, his designer shirt was splattered with something dark, and his hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold the glass of scotch our father had poured for him. Elara, you have to. My mother Amelia gripped my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Her voice was a low, desperate hiss. You have to do this for him, for the family. My father, Richard, stood by the mantelpiece, his face a grim mask of resolve. It was you driving, you understand? You took the car without permission. You were joyriding. I looked from my mother's frantic eyes to my father's cold, commanding stare, and then to Leo, who was now attempting to produce tears. It was a pathetic, sniveling performance. It was also a perfect echo. I had seen this exact scene before. I had lived this moment, smelled these smells, felt this exact brand of coercive terror. In another life, a life that ended with the cold shock of a shiv sliding between my ribs on a grimy prison floor, I had said yes. I had nodded, numb and desperate for a scrap of the love they so lavishly showered on my brother, and I had taken the fall. I remembered the weight of the lie settling over me. I remembered the cold click of handcuffs, the disbelieving face of the public defender, the years of letters that went unanswered. I remembered hearing from another inmate, a woman who'd seen my family on a local news segment about their tragic loss, how Leo was thriving, how he'd posted pictures of himself on a yacht in Monaco, laughing, while I rotted away for his crime. I remembered dying alone, my last thought a bitter, useless rage at my own stupidity. But this time, when I woke up screaming in my teenage bed 6 months ago, I wasn't a ghost. I was a harbinger. I had been given a second chance, not for forgiveness, but for vengeance. I had been counting down the days to this exact moment, this nexus of my past and future. The sirens were deafening now, washing the room in strobing blues and reds. A heavy, official knock hammered at the front door. My mother shook me, her voice cracking. Elara, promise us. Tell them you were driving. Leo looked at me, his lip quivering. Please, Ellie, I'll make it up to you, I swear. I looked at the three of them, the architects of my first destruction. The desperate mother who would sacrifice her daughter to save her son. The powerful father who saw me as nothing more than a disposable pawn to protect his legacy. The sniveling, cowardly brother who had killed someone tonight through his own arrogance and now expected me to pay the price. A cold, beautiful calm settled over me. The fear was gone, burned away by the memory of my own blood cooling on concrete. I pulled my arm from my mother's grasp. I looked each of them in the eye, savoring the flicker of confusion on their faces. And then I gave them the answer I had died wishing I had given before. No. The word was quiet, but it landed in the room like a grenade. My mother recoiled as if I'd slapped her. My father's jaw tightened, a vein pulsing in his temple. Leo's fake tears dried up instantly, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated fury. The knocking at the door came again, louder this time. The end was here, but this time, it was their end, not mine. To understand the depth of my refusal, you have to understand the geography of my family. It wasn't a democracy, it was a monarchy, and Leo was the crown prince. I was, at best, a lady-in-waiting and at worst, the court jester, there to be blamed for every spilled drink and failed harvest. My existence was a footnote in the grand, sweeping epic of Leo's glorious life. It started early. When we were children, Leo pushed our grandmother's priceless porcelain vase off a pedestal. As the shards tinkled across the hardwood floor, his 6-year-old eyes filled with tears, he pointed a chubby finger at me and whispered, Elara did it. I was 5. I spent the day locked in my room, my pleas of innocence echoing in an empty hallway, while my parents took Leo out for ice cream to soothe his trauma. That was the first brick in the wall they built between us. As we grew, the bricks became boulders. His C-grade report cards were framed and celebrated as a sign of a social, well-adjusted boy not bogged down by boring academics. My straight A's were met with a cursory nod and a warning not to make your brother feel bad. When I won the state-level science fair in 10th grade, my parents missed the ceremony because Leo had a soccer scrimmage he wasn't even playing in. He was warming the bench. They came home that night with a new trophy for his shelf, most enthusiastic sideline supporter, and didn't even ask if I had won. The financial neglect was just as insidious. They started a college fund for both of us. His was for whatever Ivy League institution is lucky enough to have him. Mine was for a sensible state school, if you can get in. But over the years, my fund became their personal slush fund for Leo's whims. A $5,000 withdrawal for a top-of-the-line gaming computer because Leo was exploring a future in esports. $10,000 for a summer trip to Europe with his friends because he needed to be culturally enriched. The final killing blow came on his 18th birthday. They drained the last $30,000 from my account, combined it with their own money, and bought him a brand new metallic blue sports car. "You don't mind, do you, sweetie?" my mother had said, not even looking at me as she handed the keys to a squealing Leo. "He needs a reliable car for getting to campus. You can just get a loan for your little community college." That car, that gleaming blue coffin, that was the car he was driving when he mowed down a father of three who was crossing the street. In my first life, I was at home, studying for the SATs I'd have to ace to get a scholarship, since my college fund was now a collection of tires and leather seats in the garage. The call came just after midnight, Leo babbling incoherently. He'd been at a party, there was drinking, there were drugs, there was a street race with his idiot friends. Someone had dared him to push the car to its limit. He did. A man stepped off a curb. Leo swerved too late. When my parents brought him home, the plan was already formed. It was presented to me not as a request, but as a foregone conclusion. I didn't have a driver's license, only a learner's permit. That would make my story of taking the car for a joyride more believable. I was a girl and a minor. The courts would be lenient. Leo was a boy with his whole bright future ahead of him. A felony would ruin him. I was just a Lara. My future was malleable, disposable. They promised me the world. The best lawyers. A slap on the wrist. A trust fund waiting for me when I got out. They'd tell everyone I was studying abroad. It would be our little secret. A testament to my love for the family. Desperate, naive, and conditioned by a lifetime of seeking their approval, I agreed. I traded my life for a phantom of their affection. The betrayal was systematic and absolute. The best lawyer was an overworked, underpaid public defender who advised me to plead guilty. The slap on the wrist was a 10-year sentence in a maximum security juvenile facility, which became an adult prison on my 18th birthday. The letters stopped after the first month. The money for my commissary account never came. My study abroad story was quickly forgotten. I became the family's shameful secret, the skeleton they locked away so they could continue polishing their golden boy. My death was as meaningless as my life had been. A fight over a stolen bar of soap in the showers. A flash of metal, a searing pain. The last thing I saw was the grimy, water-stained ceiling, and my last thought was of Leo, free and laughing somewhere under a warm sun. Then, darkness, a vast, empty silence, and then a violent gasp for air. I was sitting bolt upright in my own bed, in my own room, the posters from my high school years still taped to the wall. Sunlight streamed through my window. My heart was hammering against my ribs, the phantom pain of a knife wound still echoing in my side. I scrambled out of bed and looked in the mirror. My face was younger, unlined by prison yard stress. My hair was long. There were no scars, no tattoos. I looked at the calendar on my desk. It was March 26th, the day of the accident. I had woken up. On the morning of the day my life was supposed to end, I had been sent back. And as the shock subsided, it was replaced by a cold, crystalline certainty. I was not sent back to prevent the tragedy. I was sent back to redirect it to its rightful owner. The morning unfolded with the sickening familiarity of a recurring nightmare. I watched my mother make Leo his favorite breakfast, pancakes piled high with whipped cream and chocolate chips, while I was handed a piece of dry toast. I watched my father slip him a $100 bill, clapping him on the back and saying, "Have fun tonight, son, but not too much fun." The wink he gave him was a clear endorsement of the very behavior that would lead to a man's death in less than 12 hours. And in my first life, I spent the day in a haze of anxiety, trying to study but feeling a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. This time, I had a purpose. I knew I couldn't stop him. Arguing would be pointless. "You're just jealous of his car," they'd say. "Stop trying to ruin your brother's fun." Sabotaging the car was too risky. They'd pin it on me instantly. No, my plan had to be more subtle. It couldn't be about prevention. It had to be about undeniable, irrefutable proof. I was no longer a victim praying for rescue. I was a predator laying a trap. My first move was Leo's phone. He was notoriously clumsy with his electronics. As he was heading out the door for school, I tripped in the hallway, sending the mug of water I was carrying flying. It arced perfectly, drenching the front of his jeans and, more importantly, the brand new smartphone in his pocket. He howled in outrage, calling me every name under the sun. My mother rushed over, not to see if I was okay, but to fuss over him, dabbing at his jeans with a paper towel. "It's ruined!" he shrieked, pulling the dead phone from his pocket. "Oh, darling, don't worry," my mother cooed. "We'll get you a new one tomorrow. Just use your old one for today." He grumbled, but fished an older model out of his desk drawer, a burner phone he used when he didn't want our parents tracking his main line. He had no idea that 3 months ago, in the dead of the night, I had taken that phone and installed a sophisticated piece of spyware on it. A ghost program that would record every call, log every keystroke, and track its GPS location in real time, all while remaining completely invisible. Check. Next, the car, the beautiful blue death machine. In the first trial, a key piece of evidence was the dash cam. The police had found it, but the memory card was mysteriously corrupted. A convenient accident I was certain my father's high-priced fixer had arranged. This time would be different. While everyone was out, I went to the garage. The car had its own Wi-Fi hotspot for its infotainment system. It took me less than 5 minutes to connect my laptop, bypass the laughably simple password, and access the dashcam settings. Instead of recording to the local SD card, I rerouted the feed. I set it to live stream directly to a secure, anonymous cloud storage account I had created under a false name, an account that could be accessed from any device in the world. As an extra layer of insurance, I took a tiny, voice-activated audio recorder, the size of a sugar cube, and used a strip of black tape to affix it deep under the driver's seat. Check. My third piece of the puzzle was the witness. During my first trial, I vaguely remembered the prosecutor mentioning a homeless man who had been near the scene of the crash. His testimony was dismissed as unreliable, but I remembered his name from the case file, Jasper. And I remembered the corner he always occupied downtown, outside a closed-down bakery. I took a bus downtown that afternoon. I found him there, a frail man with kind, tired eyes. I didn't ask him for anything. I just gave him a bag with 2 hot roast beef sandwiches, a thermos of coffee, a thick wool blanket, and $100 in cash. Tucked inside the blanket was a cheap, prepaid cell phone. "My name is Alara," I told him, meeting his suspicious gaze. "I don't want anything from you, but my brother, he drives a flashy blue sports car and he's a reckless idiot. If you happen to see that car driving dangerously tonight in this area, do me a favor and call the only number programmed into this phone. Just describe what you see. Someone will make it worth your while." He just stared, but he took the bag. I knew the scene of the crime was only 3 blocks from his corner. He would see it, he would call, and the number I'd programmed in the phone belonged to a second burner phone hidden in the bottom of my backpack. Check. Finally, I needed an alibi. A rock-solid, time-stamped, witnessed alibi. At 6 p.m., I walked to the town's public library. I made a point of chatting with the librarian at the front desk, Martha, asking her for recommendations. I checked out 3 books, ensuring my name and the time were logged in their system. Then, I went to the public computer terminals, logged in with my library card, and spent the next 3 hours browsing art history websites and writing a paper for school. I was in full view of at least a dozen people and directly under a security camera. When the crash happened, at precisely 8:47 p.m., I was on record miles away, researching the Italian Renaissance. Checkmate. I walked home under the cold, starry sky, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was a ghost setting the stage for my own haunting, and the curtain was about to rise. The call came at 12:13 a.m. I was in my room, pretending to read, when my mother's shriek ripped through the quiet house. I heard my father's heavy footsteps thundering down the stairs. I crept to the top of the staircase and listened. It was Leo, his voice thin and reedy with panic, babbling through the phone. Came out of nowhere. Oh God, he's not moving. Dad, you have to help me. The next hour was a whirlwind of practiced crisis management. My father's voice was low and commanding, issuing instructions. My mother was a flurry of motion, pacing and wringing her hands. They brought Leo home through the back entrance, his clothes disheveled, his face a mask of terror. And then, they assembled in the living room. They formed their tight little circle of three, and then they turned, as one, to look at me, the tool they kept in the drawer for just such an emergency. That was when they cornered me. That was when the sirens started. And that was when, for the first time in 2 lives, I finally told them no. The silence that followed my refusal was more shocking than a scream. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and frantic energy out of the room. My mother stared at me, her mouth agape, as if I'd just started speaking in a demonic tongue. My father's eyes narrowed into slits of cold reptilian fury. Leo, the centerpiece of the drama, actually stopped crying. What? What did you just say? My mother whispered, her voice trembling. I said no, I repeated, my own voice clear and steady. It felt powerful. It felt like breathing after being held underwater for a lifetime. I will not lie for him. I will not go to prison for him, not this time. The phrase, not this time, hung in the air, an odd, inexplicable note that only I understood. Before they could process it, my father lunged forward, his face purple with rage. Don't you be a selfish little brat. Your brother's life is at stake. What about my life? I shot back, taking an involuntary step backward. The one you were all perfectly happy to sign away to save him? That is enough, he roared. You will do as you are told. My mother tried a different tactic, her expression melting into one of pained, manipulative sorrow. She reached for me, her hands fluttering like wounded birds. Alara, baby, please. He's your brother. We're your family. Families protect each other. He made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but his future. He's going to be someone important. Don't you want that for him? His future is not my responsibility, I said, my voice like ice. He built his future tonight behind the wheel of that car. He can live in it. That's when my mother's mask of sorrow cracked, and she slapped me. The sting across my cheek was sharp, but I barely felt it. I just stared back at her, my expression unwavering. Her attack only solidified my resolve. The hard, official knock on the front door saved her from having to see the utter lack of pain in my eyes. The spell was broken. Panic flooded the room again. My father shot me a look of pure venom before striding to the door, smoothing his clothes, and composing his face into a mask of concerned civility. Good evening, officers. Is there a problem? 2 uniformed police officers stood on our porch. The senior of the 2, a man with a graying mustache and weary eyes, stepped forward. Sir, we're investigating a fatal hit-and-run incident on Elm Street. A vehicle registered to this address was witnessed leaving the scene. My God, my father said, performing his shock beautifully. Was anyone hurt? The victim was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, sir, the officer said grimly. We need to speak with everyone in the house. May we come in? They were led into the living room, and the scene was a perfect tableau of misdirection. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Leo was slumped on the couch, looking pale and sick, the very picture of a traumatized witness. I stood apart by the window, watching. They separated us for questioning. My father spun a masterful tale of a quiet family evening, disturbed by this terrible news. My mother corroborated it, adding flourishes of her own horror and grief. They took Leo into the dining room. Through the partially open door, I could hear him weaving his lies, his voice choked with fake emotion. He claimed the car had been stolen from the driveway hours ago. He'd only just noticed it was missing. It was a good story, plausible. Without a confession or a reliable witness, it would become a frustrating dead end for the police. The family name and my father's influence would muddy the waters until the whole thing quietly disappeared. It would have worked. It did work the first time. When it was my turn, the senior officer, Detective Miller, led me into the kitchen. He had a kind face, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Your parents and brothers say you were all here tonight, that the car was stolen. Is that what you remember, Alara? I took a deep breath. It was time. No, Detective, that's not what I remember. Miller's eyebrows shot up. Go on. My brother took the car. He went to a party. He called my father a little over an hour ago, panicking. He said he'd hit someone. Miller's expression hardened. He knew he was being played, and he didn't like it. It's your word against three others, young lady. Your family is telling a very different story. I know, I said calmly. That's why I came prepared. I pulled out my phone. I've been worried about my brother's driving for a long time. He's reckless. The car has a dash cam with a Wi-Fi feature. A few weeks ago, I accessed it. I was worried he'd get into an accident and try to lie about it, so I configured it to live stream its recordings to a secure cloud server instead of the local memory card, for his own safety, of course. I passed him my phone with the login screen for the cloud service open. His eyes widened slightly. He pulled out his own department-issued tablet, typed in the credentials, and his face went blank as he stared at the screen. He tapped play on the most recent file, uploaded less than 2 hours ago. I didn't need to see it. I had already reviewed it myself. The video was damningly clear. The first-person view from the car. The sound of Leo and his two friends laughing and shouting over loud music. The distinct glint of a flask being passed around. The camera's angle caught a perfect shot of Leo using a rolled-up bill to snort a line of white powder off the car's center console. Then came the slurred conversation, captured in crystal-clear audio from the hidden recorder I'd planted. Dude, see if you can get it to 120, one friend yelled. Watch me, Leo slurred back. The video showed the speedometer climbing, 90, 100, 110. The streetlights became a blurry tunnel, then a figure stepping into a crosswalk. There was no time to react. The sickening thud, the spider web of cracks spreading across the windshield, the car swerving violently before screeching to a halt. The video wasn't the end. The audio was the nail in the coffin. Leo's panicked, high-pitched scream. Oh my God, I hit him! I killed him! Go, go, go! His friends screamed. Drive! Just drive! Nobody saw. The sound of the engine roaring back to life as the car sped away filled the silent kitchen. Detective Miller watched the entire thing without blinking. When it was over, he looked up at me, his expression a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. Is there anything else? He asked, his voice low. He wasn't using his primary phone tonight, I said, delivering the final blow. He was using a burner. If you get a warrant for it, I suspect you'll find some very interesting calls and texts from just before he got behind the wheel. The phone also has a tracking app installed. It will place him at the scene of the accident and then back at this house. Detective Miller slowly stood up, his eyes blazing. He walked back into the living room, tablet in hand. My father stood up to intercept him, his face a mask of blustering indignation. Detective, I hope you haven't been bothering my daughter with this nonsense. Miller didn't even look at him. He walked straight to Leo, who had shrunk back into the couch cushions, his face ashen. Leo Albright, he said, his voice booming through the silent house. You are under arrest for the crime of vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene of a fatal accident and driving under the influence. My mother let out a strangled cry. My father was frozen, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Two other officers stepped forward. One of them pulled Leo's arms behind his back. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs snapping shut was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life. An hour after I had said no, my brother was in chains. Leo started sobbing, real tears this time, pathetic and useless. As they hauled him past me, his eyes met mine. They were filled with confusion, betrayal, and a deep, burning hatred. I met his gaze and felt nothing but the sweet, cold peace of justice, perfectly served. As the police car pulled away, its lights painting the street in silent, sweeping strokes of red and blue, the fragile facade of my family shattered into a million pieces. My mother collapsed onto the floor, her wails echoing the sirens that were now fading into the distance. She wasn't crying for the man who was dead, or for the daughter she had tried to sacrifice. She was crying for the disruption to her perfect life, for the tarnishing of her golden boy. My father stood utterly still, his face a terrifying canvas of impotent rage. He turned his gaze on me, and the look in his eyes was one I had never seen before. It wasn't disappointment or anger. It was pure, unadulterated loathing. He looked at me as if I were a venomous snake he had discovered nesting in his bed. "You!" he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. "You did this. You destroyed your brother. You destroyed this family." "No," I said, my voice eerily calm in the storm of their grief. "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped letting you destroy me. The family was already broken. I just turned on the lights so you could see the cracks." I turned without another word and walked up the stairs. The sound of my mother's sobbing followed me, but it had no power over me anymore. In my room, I pulled a pre-packed duffel bag from the back of my closet. I had been preparing for this moment for 6 months. Every penny I had earned from my part-time job, every piece of clothing I truly valued, every important document I possessed was in that bag. When I came back downstairs, my father was on the phone, undoubtedly calling the most expensive lawyer in the state, the first of many futile attempts to glue their shattered world back together. He didn't look at me as I walked to the front door. I was already dead to him. I paused on the threshold and looked back at the wreckage. My mother, a heap on the floor. My father, a pillar of rage and denial. The house, which had always felt like a beautifully decorated prison, now just seemed pathetic and small. I felt a strange sense of pity for them. Their entire universe had been built around the worship of a false idol, and I had just toppled him from his pedestal. They had nothing left. I had everything. I walked out the door into the cool night air, and I didn't look back. The legal proceedings were a formality. The evidence was absolute and undeniable. The dashcam and audio recordings were played in court, silencing the entire room. The data from Leo's burner phone showed calls to his dealer 30 minutes before the crash, and GPS data that tracked his exact route from the party to the scene of the crime and back home. Jasper, the homeless man I had helped, came forward as a witness. Bolstered by the knowledge that the police were taking the case seriously, he gave a clear, sober account of seeing the blue sports car speeding down the street moments before he heard the impact. My father's army of lawyers couldn't do a thing. They tried to paint me as a vindictive, jealous sister, but the evidence was about Leo's actions, not my motives. Leo was convicted on all counts. Given the aggravating factors, the drugs, the alcohol, the street racing, fleeing the scene, the judge showed no mercy. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. His 2 friends from the car were also charged as accessories and received lengthy sentences of their own. The financial and social fallout for my parents was catastrophic. Their legal bills bankrupted them. They had to sell the house to cover the costs. My father's business partners distanced themselves from him, and my mother was ostracized from her social circles. They became the subjects of sordid local gossip, the wealthy couple who raised a monster and tried to force their daughter to pay for his crimes. They were ruined, left with nothing but their shared bitterness and the ghost of their precious son. As for me, I disappeared. I used the money I had saved to buy a bus ticket to a city on the other side of the country. I legally changed my name, severing the last tie to the people who had given me life, only to try and take it away. I enrolled in a university, majoring in art history, the passion they had always dismissed as frivolous. For the first time, I made real friends. I met people who were interested in my thoughts and celebrated my successes. I fell in love with a kind man who saw me for who I was, not for what I could do for him. I learned that family wasn't about obligation and sacrifice, but about mutual respect and unconditional support. Years later, I stood on the balcony of the beautiful apartment I shared with my husband. My university degree hung framed on the wall behind me, a testament not just to my hard work, but to my survival. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of infinite possibilities. The memories of my past life, of the prison cell and the cold fear, were like a story I had read about someone else. The family I left behind was a distant echo, powerless to ever hurt me again. I was happy. I was successful. I was free. And in the quiet peace of my new life, I knew that true victory wasn't just about ensuring justice was served to my enemies. It was about building a life so full of light that their darkness could never touch me again.